is moments away, but before we get started, we want to remind all of you that this show is powered by unions. These hardworking men and women were kind enough to get behind us in this new venture, so we'd like to thank the following unions for making this show possible. The International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers, not Aerosmith, Local 126 and District 8, the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Local 9, the International Union of Operating Engineers, Local 150. All of those unions help make this possible. And, of course, the Ben Joravsky Show is brought to you by the Chicago Federation of Labor. And with that said, the Ben Joravsky Show begins right now. The Ben Joravsky Show is brought to you by the Chicago Sun-Times. For the latest in Chicago and Illinois news, sports, weather, and the latest in national news from a real Chicago frame of mind and real Chicago writers, check out the Chicago Sun-Times. Read the daily paper or online at chicago.suntimes.com. And hey, if you have a little extra cash, subscribe. And by the Chicago Reader. For a deeper dive in the daily Chicago news and for all of what's going on in this city, you gotta read the Reader. Music, arts and culture, film, extensive event calendars, concert listings, and more, including weekly political columns from writers like Maya Dukmasova and, yes, our very own Ben Joravsky. The Chicago Reader is free in newsstands and at chicagoreader.com. That's chicagoreader.com. It is Tuesday, March 5th, and live from the Chicago Sun-Times studio on Racine Avenue, this is the Ben Joravsky Show. Today on the program, we welcome Sun-Times writer Marc Brown and president of the Chicago Principals Association, the one, the only, Mr. Troy LaRavia. And now your host, president of nothing, Chicago Reader columnist, Benny J. Ben Joravsky.
Hello, everybody. Ben Joravsky here. We're calling this Cut from the Same Cloth Tuesday. And here's why. Had a great 3 days off. How about you, Dr. D? You have a good 3 days off?
Not bad. Not bad at all.
I saw a great Bulls game. Quadruple overtime.
Oh, my.
Bulls victory over Atlanta. Finally got around to seeing Spider-Man, the animation flick. It's been out for a while, but I finally got around to seeing it. I love Spider-Man the first hour or so. But then, it's just like Black Panther and all the other Marvel flicks. I love the setup, but then once they get to the action, I don't really like the action. So I'm like, let's get this thing over with, or can we go back to the setup? It's sort of like opera, D. I like everything about opera except the singing, all right? So I like everything
That's a
about
big part of the opera, by the way.
It's the same thing with Marvel. Anyway, woke up Sunday to find my beloved bright one, the Chicago Sun-Times.
Show those listeners that news paper.
Here it is, everybody, the Sun-Times. Excellent article, a lot to talk about. Feds wiretap shows Madigan Solis eye development of state land used for parking in Chinatown by Marc Brown and Tim Novak. Folks, I'm going to do the deep dive, take a little moment here to explain what's in this story. You're going to have to follow along with me because it's a convoluted, complicated story. Marc and Tim did a very good job of laying it all out. But the point is, I want my listeners out, not only in the city of Chicago, but me, I'm speaking to you listeners out there in Kankakee and Oswego and Plainfield and
Kankakee,
Joliet
Oswego,
and all those places we visited all the time. Don't think that the Republicans outside of Chicago are that much different than Chicagoans. Coming out of that Rauner gubernatorial campaign day, they were always talking about, the Republicans were talking about the Democratic machine, the evil Democratic machine. Well, if you take the deep dive in Marc Brown and Tim Novak's story, a lot to talk about, you see Republicans and Democrats in this state have a lot in common. All right, now let's back up and talk about this. Basically, Alderman Danny Solis, yes, that Alderman Danny Solis from the 25th Ward in the city of Chicago, the one who eventually was caught wearing a wire for the feds, and the one who was swapping approval on zoning deals for Viagra, that Danny Solis, according to the story a few years back, was greasing the way to sell a parking lot at Cermak and Wentworth in Chinatown so it could be developed. A word about that parking lot. I love that parking lot, all right? I mean, whenever I go to eat in Chinatown, I eat in Chinatown all the time, D. You know that. You've been with me in Chinatown eating. I'd park in that parking lot. So I'm like, hey, if you're going to develop that parking lot, at least run it by me or, everybody else in the city of Chicago. But unbeknownst to anybody, they were wheeling and dealing to sell that parking lot so it could be developed. Now, follow me in this, folks. The parking lot is actually owned by the state. It's rented by the people who run the parking lot. Alderman Solis wanted the state to sell the parking lot to the city. Why? Because once the city controlled the parking lot, it would be a lot easier for Danny to grease the ways for the developers to build a building on it, thus wiping away the parking lot that I needed to park whenever I ate in Chinatown. I know the story is really not about D, but about me, D, but I'm just kind of bringing myself into it. Anyway,
well, it is your show.
Yeah, it is my show. All right, got that, everybody? Anyway, Teresa Ma, the state rep from Chinatown, was opposed to selling the parking lot, okay? So what did they do? They tried to do an end around. Follow me on this, folks. The developers wanted to develop that parking lot, hired a Republican lobbyist who contacted a downstate Republican state rep who sponsored an amendment that would direct the state to sell the parking lot. You hear that? The local state rep, a Democrat, Teresa Ma, was against it, so they try to be slick and go around her and get a Republican downstater to pass it. Ultimately, the deal fell apart. Thank goodness. Still got a parking lot there whenever I go to Chinatown. But the point is this. There really was not much difference between Republicans and Democrats. They were all kind of working on this deal together. So the next time you hear some Republican going on and on about the evil Chicago Democratic machine. Remember that parking lot deal, folks. They're all kind of cut from the same cloth. We got a great show today, everybody. Marc Brown, the same Marc Brown who co-wrote that great story and about the parking lot deal, and a columnist for the Chicago Sun-Times, will be with us in the studio. We'll be talking about that deal and probably talk a little mayoral politics if I know Marc Brown, and maybe also talk about the upcoming presidential race. Troy LaRavia, yes, that Troy LaRavia, the head of the Chicago Principals Association, will be here at 2 o'clock. If you recall, Troy LaRavia, as I like to put it, was the original gangster. He was the first candidate to declare to run for mayor when Rahm was still very much in the race. Ultimately, he decided not to run for mayor. And then he sort of disappeared from sight, decided to have a lower profile, but he's making his return today. We'll be talking politics, what his views on the mayor's race are, who he's going to support, if anyone, Tony Preckwinkle or Lori Lightfoot. And also, he was a Bernie Sanders supporter back in 2016. He was a Bernie Sanders delegate. Get his thoughts on Bernie Sanders, the big rally that Bernie held in Chicago as we prepare. It's just on the horizon, everybody. I can see it up ahead.
Oh, yeah, I see it.
The 2020 presidential election
look at it.
is just around the corner. So Troy LaRavia will be here. Marc Brown will be here. Miles, we call him the editor. Porter, the pride and joy of Roosevelt University, is here. Coming off a great victory. Well, not a victory over the weekend in baseball. But Miles is helping us out. And, of course, the man, the myth, the legend, the man we call the doctor, producer Dennis, with the news.
Oh, man, I do see that election ahead. Hey, who's that one guy? Oh, yeah, that's John Delaney.
Oh, John Delaney.
Forgot about him.
Yeah.
Easy to forget.
Yeah, he's the state, the congressman from Maryland. Am I right on that one?
Hey, nice job. All right, it's the middle of the day. Let's talk about the national news happening this afternoon. Actually, before we get wrapped up in today's news, Ben, we got to talk about what went down earlier in the week. And no, I'm not talking about that absurd CPAC speech from our president.
And all of a sudden, they're trying to take you out with okay?
No, not talking about that one.
Okay.
Darling, is the wind blowing today? I'd like to watch television. You know I'm totally off script right now.
Honestly, seen one Trump speech. You've seen them all, guys.
It's the win. I guess it was this assault on anything remotely resembling environmentally safe energy sources. I think that's what.
No, I'm not talking about that Trump speech. No, I am not. Ben, we got to talk about that Chicago visit from Bernie Sanders on Sunday.
We're not only going to defeat Trump, we're going to transform the United States of America.
Over 12,000 people gathered at Navy Pier Sunday night as 2020 presidential candidate Bernie Sanders rallied his Illinois and Chicagoland supporters. Ben, I have to ask, in your opinion, out of the other 10 Democratic candidates running for president, would any of them be able to draw a crowd of 12,000 people if they came to Chicago?
No way.
No way?
I don't believe any of them at this particular moment could do so. 12,000, they packed Navy Pier. Bernie Sanders is still sort of a rock star, obviously. You know, how much did he raise, D? 10 million in his first couple days since he announcing. So those Bernie Sanders supporters are rock solid. You know, I remember this. I remember when the moment, D, it hit home that Bernie Sanders had reached people who aren't ordinarily reached by the political process. And I was walking down the street, follow me on this, and it was 2016, and I saw Joey. What up, Joey? A kid who grew up in the neighborhood with my daughters. He's about, I would say, 29 or so. And I had never thought of Joey as being a person involved in politics. I believe he was a bartender at the time, whatever. And he told me, he goes, I'm feeling the burn. He was the one who raised it. He raised politics to me. And he somehow or other, Bernie Sanders, at age whatever he was back then, 73, 74, had reached a 25-year-old who had college bills to worry about. And, you know, he had reached millennials who were outside the political process. So he has, I would not underestimate Bernie Sanders at all. That ability to get 12,000 people in Navy Pier is no joke. Maybe Elizabeth Warren, now I'm thinking about it. Elizabeth Warren has that kind of draw. Kamala Harris, 12,000. She's kind of an unknown factor in Illinois right now. It may take a while before she builds it, with a lot of preparation. I mean, let's face it, the Illinois primary is not for another year or so. So not a lot of the other candidates are thinking about Illinois. Bernie spent time in Chicago, as you recall. He was at the University of Chicago in the early 60s, was involved in civil rights protests, got arrested, protesting to desegregate the schools. So he's trying to, you know, make Chicago a part of his narrative. He talked about that. He's speaking more now in his speeches about who he is. He's trying to personalize the election, so to speak. I guess he's trying to learn from some of the mistakes he made back in 2016. The big mistake, the great oversight, of course, is his inability back in 2016 to really successfully campaign in black communities and woo black voters. That's going to be a huge obstacle for Bernie again, I think. So I think he's trying to work on that by trying to, integrate into his narrative stories about how he was arrested in Chicago back in the early 60s. Can you believe that? Bernie Sanders has been around since the early 60s as an activist. So, Bernie's going to be a formidable force in the upcoming primaries.
Well, no mistake here. Mr. Sanders is in the race, and he definitely has a base. Here's audio from Sanders Sunday night in Chicago.
We are gathered here tonight to complete the political revolution we started 3 years ago. 3 years ago, they thought we were kind of crazy and extreme. Not the case anymore. 3 years ago, the ideas that we brought forth here in Illinois and all over the country were rejected by Democrats. Not anymore. We have begun the political revolution, and now we're gonna complete it.
Bernie, man, I still can't get over Bernie as a force. You know, I remember in 2016, D, when he first emerged, I go, nobody's going to vote for this guy. He reminds me of so many people in my family. You know what I mean? It's like a Thanksgiving at the Ben Joravsky house or something. But he caught on. I mean, there's something real about him, let's be honest. I got my issues, a few issues with Bernie Sanders. He's not a Democrat. You know, it's kind of interesting he's running for the Democratic nomination. I don't believe he's a member of the Democratic Party. I think officially he is an independent, but he's going to have to deal with that. As I said, the inability to reach out and get black support, that's going to be an obstacle he has to overcome. But just hearing him, though, I mean, he is, listen, he's been in it for the long haul. He's right. He was championing these issues long before anybody else would. And even now, there are those in the Democratic Party who say they're too extreme. Things like free college is just too much of a promise that we can't keep. Medicare for all is a promise we cannot keep. But these are goals, in my humble opinion, that the Democratic Party should be pursuing and trying to achieve. And if you run away from your goals before you even get in the race, and you're never going to get them. So I give Bernie credit for, as isolating these issues, putting a spotlight on these issues, and accentuating these values that Democrats are supposed to hold dear or true to, and forcing everybody else to the move to the left.
All right, a big difference in Bernie Sanders' run this time. This previous run, Hillary Clinton was around. Well, she made it official yesterday. Hillary Clinton is not running for president in 2020.
I'm not running, but I'm going to keep working and speaking and standing up for what I believe. I want to be sure that people understand I'm going to keep speaking out. I'm not going anywhere. What's at stake in our country, the kinds of things that are happening right now are deeply troubling to me. We've gotten not just polarized, we've gotten into really opposing camps, unlike anything I've ever seen in my adult life.
Yes, Hillary Clinton, of course, her great contribution to the Democratic Party in two elections, 2008 and, of course, 2016, was proving that a woman could run for president, proving that a woman could be, she was the nominee. Actually, she won the election. She got more votes than Donald Trump, as I like to point out. Only this crazy system we have in this country enabled Donald Trump to take the White House. And so, her legacy can be seen in Kirsten Gillibrand, the senator from New York who's running, and Elizabeth Warren, the senator from Massachusetts who's running, and Amy Klobuchar. I can't remember. Klobuchar. We have a hard time with her name. The senator from Minnesota who's running. So her legacy lives on. And you know what, D? I'm one of those Democrats. I voted for Bernie, but I turned right around and voted for Hillary, and I'm not ashamed of it, okay? So all you Bernie supporters out there who are hating on Hillary, come on now. All right? She said, I think we'd be a lot better off with Hillary Clinton as our president and Donald John Trump, that is for sure.
Oh, you mean this guy?
Wind blowing today. I'd like to watch television.
Huh.
You know I'm totally off script right now.
Yeah, we know. Oh, we know, dude.
I'm a wild and crazy guy. I'm Donald John Trump.
We know. Now, of course, we will keep you posted on these stories as today's program rolls along. Benny, Jay, I got a quick question for you, buddy.
Oh, okay.
You wouldn't happen to be ready to find out what's going on in Chicago and or Illinois, would you?
I was born ready.
Love that answer. Fantastic answer, especially at this time, because coming up after the break, people, we are going to find out what else is news.
I love this part of the show, folks. Doctor pulls that little trick out of his little sleeve. We'll see what it is when we return.
Hey there, producer Dennis here. Thanks for finding and listening to the brand new Ben Joravsky Show. All right, so here's how this works. The Ben Joravsky Show live streams on the Chicago Sun-Times YouTube channel Tuesday through Friday, 1 until 3 p.m. Once the show is over, you can listen to the replay on our YouTube channel, or we throw it online for you to download by 4 p.m. Where can you download the Ben Joravsky Show, you may be asking yourself? Well, you may be asking yourself a fantastic question. You can find previous Ben Joravsky shows and guest interviews through several outlets. The Chicago Sun-Times online, chicago.suntimes.com, the Chicago Reader online, chicagoreader.com, and wherever else you listen to your favorite podcasts. Apple Podcasts, Google Play, pick one. Just search for The Ben Joravsky Show. J-O-R-A, V as in victory, S-K-Y. So, let's recap. Tuesday through Friday, 1 until 3 p.m. Live streamed on the Chicago Sun-Times YouTube channel and downloadable by 4 at chicago.suntimes.com, chicagoreader.com, and wherever else you listen to your favorite podcast. Yes, the Ben Joravsky Show is back. We're live and downloaded. Tell your friends and enjoy the rest of the show. If you would like to advertise with the Ben Joravsky Show, and who wouldn't, contact Tracy Baim at publisher@chicagoreadercorp.com. We have several advertising options for your business or organization, and quite frankly, we would love nothing more than to tell our listeners all about it. Once again, that's Tracy Baim at publisher at Chicago Reader Corp. That's CORP as in Paul.com to advertise with the Ben Joravsky Show, the Chicago Reader, and the Chicago Sun-Times. We look forward to plugging you. Okay, well, that came out kind of weird. More of the Ben Joravsky Show live and downloaded in moments. Hey, welcome back to the Ben Joravsky Show, live from the Chicago Sun-Times. Stop laughing.
I just love that song. I was just sort of singing, la, da, 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 hey, da, 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 da.
No singing.
You know, we have a piano in the corner there. Any time now, do you want to get up and play that piano?
Okay, I've got a show to run here.
Sorry. Anyway, speaking of a show to run, it's
Come
time.
on.
The doctor takes a deep dive on the local news.
Yes, people, we're about to find out what's going on locally. It's time for What Else Is News. The magic number is 28. That's how many days we have until our 2019 Chicago mayoral runoff election, April 2nd, where Cook County Board President Tony Preckwinkle squares off against former prosecutor and former Chicago Police Board President Lori Lightfoot. And Ben, right now, in my bearded face, I have two pieces of audio. Ooh. And for those who are new to our program, well, we're glad you're joining us at the moment because you are about to take part in something very special. Ben, for the first time in our brand new studio, we're going to partake in one of our favorite things to do here on the Ben Joravsky Show. Ben, we're going to play and analyze candidate campaign ads.
Oh, I love this part of the show.
Yes, it's true. You may have already viewed them at nauseum on your television or computer by now, but you've yet to hear Benny J's take on them, and you're going to hear those ads in moments. But first, Mr. Joravsky, we need your take on the mayoral news that broke last night. Now, we mentioned last week how several organizations and groups in Chicago have been scratching their heads on which candidate to back in this election. Lightfoot, Preckwinkle, Lightfoot. I don't know. What do I do? Well, it looks as though that our friends over at the Chicago Federation of Labor are sick of scratching their head. The following comes from the Sun-Times and the one and only Fran the Woe Man Spielman. The Chicago Federation of Labor decided Monday to remain neutral in the historic April 2nd mayoral runoff in a move likely to be seen as a boon to Lori Lightfoot and a major blow to Tony Preckwinkle. Here's the quote from Chicago Federation of Labor president and guest this week on the Ben Joravsky Show, Bob Ryder. Bob Ryder says, quote, "Something different may have happened if we had this meeting 2 weeks from now, but we're not. Today was the day. Our representative body that makes this decision isn't scheduled to meet again during this election cycle." So once again, the Chicago Federation of Labor at the moment staying out of the Chicago mayoral runoff. Ben Joravsky, what say you?
Wait, time out. Is that the same Bob Ryder who loves 90s rock and roll music?
I believe so.
The same Bob Ryder who used to play football? The same Bob Ryder used to come on our show all the time, and he'll be here. The same Bob Ryder who'll be here tomorrow at 2:30. That Bob Ryder?
Yeah,
okay,
that guy.
just want to make Low Rider.
Okay, no.
I'm just thinking of him when I hear that.
Hang tight, audience.
Hey, you know, millennials. Here, the reality is this. I've talked to a lot of union folks, a lot of labor people. They don't know who to endorse. You know, a lot of the labor people I talked to were big fans of Susanna Mendoza. She did not win. There are those union supporters, the Chicago Teachers Union. Stacey Davis Gates will be in the studio later this week, who are big supporters of Tony Preckwinkle. But, you know, if you can't rally around one candidate, sometimes the best solution, the best strategy is just to duck out. And I don't blame them. You know, in fact, last night at bowling, I was talking to a police officer who will remain anonymous.
How'd you guys do, by the way, in bowling?
Thank you for asking.
You're welcome.
Were, excellent. We swept. Miles' dad, Miles, the editor's dad, was on fire. So, Cap, if you're listening, great job last night. Tony with the T was absolutely sensational. I did not do so well. Let's not talk about that.
Come on, Benny with a P.
But we were victorious. But I was talking to this cop, and he was saying that he has no idea who the rank and file are going to be supporting in this campaign. A lot of people, you know, they're new to Lori Lightfoot. She's a new face in Chicago politics. This is her first run for office. A lot of people woke up the day after on the election on February 28th or 27th, whatever it was, and said, "Who is this lady?" So it's too early for for the Chicago Federation of Labor to make an endorsement. You know what? It's probably just as well. Let's let this one play out. So my thought is that if you can't twist all the arms to get everybody to join forces, punt. And that's what they did.
All right, Bob Ryder once again will be on the program. When is that again, Ben?
That will be tomorrow, Wednesday at 2:30.
Wednesday, 2:30. Mark your calendars. We're going to talk with Bob Ryder, the Chicago Federation of Labor. All right. Now let's unpack these campaign ads. Once again, the mayoral runoff election is Tuesday, April 2nd. And if you're unsure of who to support, listen up, all right? This may help you out a bit. And yes, I'm also talking to you, Chicago Federation of Labor. Listen up. Bob Ryder, you listen? All right. I have campaign commercials from both candidates, Lightfoot and Preckwinkle. We'll begin with the latter. Cook County Board President Toni Preckwinkle, well, she certainly has a strategy in this election. Nothing too complex, really. Yeah, trash Lori Lightfoot. That's the plan thus far. And the following ad further proves this point. So, without further ado, let's hear the latest ad from Cook County Board President Toni Preckwinkle.
Lori Lightfoot talks a big game, but what's her real story? A wealthy corporate lawyer, Lightfoot was reprimanded for professional misconduct. She defended a Wall Street bank being sued for racial discrimination and worked for Republican politicians trying to protect their power. And after using her influence to gain a powerful appointment, she overruled investigators to justify police shootings. Turns out the only thing Lori Lightfoot's trying to change is her own story.
All right, that music sold me. I was on the fence, but then I heard that music. Oh, wow. Wow.
Oh, God. Yeah, that's, by the way, Lori Lightfoot will be our guest tonight at First Tuesday at the Hideout, 1354 West Wabansie. I should not give the address because I've discovered that the show is sold out, but this is how super millennial we will be. You can watch it on Facebook Live on our Facebook page, right?
Absolutely. Search for the Ben Joravsky Show on Facebook, and you can live stream Ben's interview, well, Ben and Mick's interview with Lori Lightfoot. Ben, spell that last name.
Which one, Mick's or mine?
Yours.
Oh, just kidding. Jorav, as in victory, SKY. You'd be astounded how many people still misspell that name. And then they assure me. I'll go, let me spell that name for Ben. I know how to spell that name. I go, oh, yeah, spell it. And then they misspell it. I go, that's why I'll spell it for you. Anyway, Lori Lightfoot will be there tonight with Mick Dumke and myself. And yes, indeed, Toni Preckwinkle made it clear on the night of the election that she was going to come in strong. She's not messing around. Her strategy, if you will, is to do sort of what Rahm did to Chewy back in 2015 and create an identity for her opponent, in this case, Lori Lightfoot, before Lori Lightfoot can create one for herself. Toni has more money than Lori, so she can go in the air faster, and she is just slamming her. Corporate lawyer, corporate lawyer, corporate lawyer. We talked about this last week. I'm not sure, where that resonates, like how people, I don't know what the negatives are on corporate lawyers. I have to admit, corporate lawyer does sound a little Republican to me. And as a corporate lawyer, Lori Lightfoot worked with Republicans on that congressional map that Toni Preckwinkle's ad is alluding to. So, there is some credibility as a corporate lawyer. She worked with Republicans or represented Republicans, but she's also been a Democrat for her whole adult life. What you do as a professional lawyer, I think most of us know, is a little different than how you vote or how, your values and views, what you do as a professional. So that'll be the challenge for Lori Lightfoot to somehow or other present herself as a real Democrat who cares about working people, poor people, middle-class people, etc. But, Toni Preckwinkle is clearly trying to present Lori Lightfoot in the scariest light possible.
And then, like I said, that music, oh, my goodness. All right, up next is the ad from Lori Lightfoot. So far, she has taken the high road here on the latest attacks from Preckwinkle. Ben, what are your thoughts on Lightfoot's approach there?
Well, you know me and the high road. I've discussed the high road many times. Michelle Obama, in October of 2016, made that famous quote at a speech somewhere talking about Hillary running against Trump. And she said, Michelle said, when Trump goes low, we'll go high. And it didn't work out so well for Hillary, even though, as I pointed out, she did win the popular vote. But maybe and it was probably her inability to, her unwillingness, whatever, to campaign in Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Michigan enough that undid her in the Electoral College. But I don't think when you're up against a Donald Trump type, you can always afford to take the high road. And I don't think it'll work for Lori Lightfoot to continually take the high road. I think she's going to have to go low before this election is over.
All right, here's the latest ad from Lightfoot. Once again, Chicago Federation of Labor. Hope you boys are listening. All right. And Ben, be ready. After this ad, I'm going to ask you which had the better ad. All right, Preckwinkle or Lightfoot. Okay. Here's the latest ad from mayoral runoff candidate Lori Lightfoot.
I traveled across the city and saw people struggling with repossessed cars and rising rent, with underfunded neighborhood schools and gun violence on their blocks. I know, on a deeply personal level, that we need change. This election is about demanding an independent, accountable city hall that serves the people, not the political machine.
All right, well, there's some digs in that little bit, too, when she talks about an independent mayor who serves the people, not the machine. She's hammering...
Subtle digs.
Yeah, subtle. Not that subtle. She's hammering on the fact that Tony Preckwinkle is to chair the Democratic Party, that Tony Preckwinkle has ties to Ed Burke and Joe Barrios and exceedingly unpopular Democrats. In the case of Burke, is under indictment. In the case of Joe Barrios, he was just bounced from office as assessor. So she's not being that. Well, she's being subtle. She didn't name Burke and Barrios there, but she's sort of just, sending out that giant dog whistle. So I guess she's not being as pure and, as I was alluding to earlier. But the reality is this. This is going to be a dirty campaign. This is Chicago politics. It gets very dirty and gets very nasty, and Lori Lightfoot's going to have to fight back too. And by the way, she was also at the start of that dealing with the stereotype that Tony Preckwinkle is trying to hammer her with, that she cares about people. She's not just an unfeeling, uncaring corporate lawyer. At the opening, she talks about people who've lost their cars. For the last 4 years or 8 years, the city of Chicago is trying to squeeze money to fund government in all kinds of ways. And one of the ways is to raise fees and fines and tickets, and people lose their cars. It's a big problem. ProPublica wrote about this and about a year or two ago. A lot of cars being snatched away by the city because people fall behind on payments. It's not fair. It's not a good, solid way to fund government, in my humble opinion. So Willie Wilson was able to use that issue to his advantage in the last election, and now I think Lori Lightfoot's trying to pick it up as well.
By the way, Willie Wilson will also be on the program this week, I believe Thursday, right, Ben? 2 o'clock?
That is correct. We got to get him that parking pass.
Yeah,
a day doesn't go by where Willie Wilson's press guy. Where's that park? I'm going to have to ask the people at the Sun-Times, do they even have parking passes?
I don't know.
Marc Brown is our next guest.
We'll find out Thursday.
That first question I'm going to ask Marc Brown, hey, can we get a parking pass for Willie Wilson?
All right, so we've heard the 2 ads. Ben Joravsky, you are officially in the hot seat. Which candidate, Lori Lightfoot or Tony Preckwinkle, who had the better ad?
In my humble opinion, those 2 ads, I felt Lori Lightfoot had the better ad. I thought Lori Lightfoot mixed saying something positive about herself with the attack, whereas the Tony ad was just an attack ad. So in my humble opinion, just on that one ad, I'd give the benefit to Lori Lightfoot.
All right, let me throw that little statistic you just gave into the Ben Joravsky Show political ad tracker, which is just me writing it on a piece of paper. Okay. Lori Lightfoot 1, Tony Preckwinkle 0. All right.
Well, there'll be plenty more ads to go with. I may just throw some at Tony Preckwinkle just to make the race interesting before all is said and done.
So there you are. Just like that, you're now in the know of what's going on in Chicago, and now you will have an answer the next time someone asks you, hey, what else is news?
All right, let me tell you something.
Okay.
Something that Bernie Sanders.
Oh, nice.
Something that Barry Sanders from the Detroit Lions.
Remember Barry
number
Sanders?
20. He was number 20.
Yeah, juke move.
And something that Colonel Sanders, I love Kentucky Fried Chicken. They all agree. You did a great job. Give yourself a raise. Take it out of petty cash. We got Marc Brown sitting right here, everybody. We'll be right back after this.
The Ben Joravsky Show is brought to you by the Chicago Sun-Times. For the latest in Chicago and Illinois news, sports, weather, and the latest in national news from a real Chicago frame of mind and real Chicago writers, check out the Chicago Sun-Times. Read the daily paper or online at chicago.suntimes.com. And hey, if you have a little extra cash, subscribe. And by the Chicago Reader. For a deeper dive in the daily Chicago news and for all of what's going on in this city, you gotta read the Reader. music, arts and culture, film, extensive event calendars, concert listings, and more, including weekly political columns from writers like Maya Dukmasova and, yes, our very own Ben Joravsky. The Chicago Reader is free in newsstands and at chicagoreader.com. That's chicagoreader.com. Commercial break over. Welcome back to the Ben Joravsky Show, live from the Chicago Sun-Times.
Yes, indeed, we are live from our beautiful studio, a cozy little corner here in the Chicago Sun-Times building, right down the hall from the washroom. My next guest is the legendary Marc Brown. He's a columnist. He's a writer, political writer for the Chicago Sun-Times. Marc, welcome to the show.
Glad to be here, Ben. I'm glad you have the show.
Yeah, I'm glad too. And, Dennis, I don't know if you know this, Marc Brown, are you from the 618 area code? You're from downstate. You're not from Chicago. You grew up in a community downstate. What's the area code? Do you remember?
I think I'm from 61571.
Do you know that, D?
Nope.
Dennis is from Alton, Illinois.
Oh, I'm not from that far down.
Oh, he's not from that far down. And anyway, we always joke about the 618 area code. I thought for a second you guys, could like hug or something because you're both from the 618, but you're not.
No, I'm a 309. I'm sorry. I spaced out on you here.
It's okay.
Well, when you're south of I-80, we're all brothers, buddy. So there you go.
All right, Marc Brown, you may be from downstate originally, but you've been covering Chicago politics for a long time. You write a political column for the Sun-Times. And the first thing I want to talk to you about is this excellent story that we're promoting all day that ran in Sunday's Sun-Times, A Lot to Talk About. That's a pun, folks. I just realized that. A lot to talk about. There is a lot to talk about in terms of lots of things to talk about. And specifically, it's a parking lot. Who wrote that headline, Marc?
There were a lot of variations over the course of they were trying to finally find a way to make this sort of dry subject interesting. So I appreciate that they got a good headline.
Well, it is. I don't think it's that dry. I think what you and Tim Novak successfully did in this article, and again, I urge everybody to read it. I talked about it already. Was to bring to life the way business is done in the city of Chicago, not just the city of Chicago, Marc, but the state of Illinois. I already accentuated the point where, again, I'll go back for people to hear. Danny Solis, the alderman of the 25th Ward, was acting on behalf, basically, of a developer who wanted to develop a parking lot in Chinatown, a parking lot, as I pointed out, that I love to use. And to get the development done, he needed the state to sell the parking lot to the city, and then Danny, could use his influence with the city to get the approval he needed for the development. And the key problem, the vexing issue facing them, was to get the state to sell the parking lot. And so they ended up bringing on, I should say, a lobbyist, a Republican lobbyist who tried to get a Republican state rep to pass the necessary legislation. It's just kind of show, this is the part I was talking about, Marc, about how Republicans and Democrats sort of work together in devious ways behind the scenes that we can't see.
Well, you did an excellent job of just cutting through all that. The amazing thing is, was he working on behalf of the developer, or was he working on behalf of the federal government to set somebody up? We don't know. And that's, to us, that's the amazing part of the story is Danny Solis was out there operating for 3 years where he's cooperating with the federal government. During that time, he raised $1.3 million and passed all kinds of legislation. Like, when was he being, was he being corrupt, or was he, working on behalf of the government to try to lure other people in? I mean, I got to believe, you got to hope that they were keeping an eye on him and it wasn't corrupt. But we know from like John Christopher that, they sometimes, who was a mole, and I forget the name of the investigation.
Silver Shovel.
That they lose control of these guys sometimes, because they're there, they trust them too much.
Yeah, Marc Brown is alluding to, of course, the Silver Shovel corruption scam from I think it's the late 80s, early 90s, and John Christopher was a mole. You're absolutely right, Marc. And not only that, they'd let him get away with it. In that case, John Christopher was paying off aldermen and state reps, I think it was, to allow to dumping in neighborhoods. So the feds were just playing along with this as huge mounds of garbage were dumped into communities, and the people were complaining, and the feds knew about it all along. So you're right. So in other words, there's a possibility you're saying that this whole parking lot scam or scheme was part of a larger attempt to. Yeah,
well, you look at how this came to light. It came to light because of this document that I'm sure you've told your listeners that the Sun-Times got its hands on. It's a sealed affidavit for a search warrant of Danny Solis, and from that we were able to find out all these things about this investigation of Danny Solis. And one of these things, and we had held this part back till now until we could try to sort it out, was that when these Chinatown developers first went in to try to set up Mike Madigan and Solis at that point, who was not cooperating, they were going in for the purpose of a hotel project that they wanted to do on a different parcel land. And then they go, by the way, what we'd really like to do is take over this major piece of parking lot in Chinatown, which, as you know, as a good Chinatown eater, I mean, that's a very vital piece of property down there. Well, we'd like to build a huge development on there. Well, from that, Madigan kind of, well, what's that about? Madigan asked, is that state-owned land? Yes, it was. Now, we did, it was all news to us, so we took several weeks to try to sort it out. And I forget where I was going, but from that, we were able to, to trace through that, yes, indeed, another developer, came in with his own project, and then they tried to slide this through in Springfield.
Yeah, you alluded to the affidavit. Actually, I did not talk in this particular show about the affidavit. I have talked in the past about it. It's one of the, or at least I wrote about it. All of this broke since in between of my gigs on the air, Mark. I had another gig. I got fired from it, and then you broke that story. You at least could have broken it like 3 weeks ago. I could have talked about it then. But I was teasing Chris Fusco, who was in the studio here, the editor of the Sun-Times. I was teasing him. The Sun-Times is the only news outlet in the city of Chicago, as far as I know, that has a copy of this affidavit. Nobody else has seen it. I know I've not, speaking for reporters everywhere, I've not seen it. Talk about this a lot with other reporters. You are one of the few people in the world, Marc Brown, who's been able to read this affidavit. And the Sun-Times has generated, I want to say, 6 major scoops. I'm doing this off the top of my head. From this affidavit. Why don't you give folks a little bit understanding of what exactly this document is?
Well, the federal FBI agents had been investigating Danny Solis for a couple of years. They'd had a wiretap up on him, and they had also run their own mole in against him, which was this developer, a guy named C. Wong, who had gotten into trouble for something exactly which we don't know, but it's he'd had some his developments went bad during the recession, and he got caught in the switches of doing something illegal. So they used him to go undercover on Mike Madigan and Solis. So then they were ready to lower the boom on Solis, so they put together an affidavit of all the little things that they'd caught him doing in the intervening years, but with the wiretap and everything. And they take that to a judge and said, we want to search his house, his offices. Strangely enough, they never got past his house and maybe one other property that he owns, where his girlfriend lived. And after that is when Danny Solis appears to have started cooperating. And we know from one of our scoops, as you put it, that Danny Solis wore a wire on Ed Burke on numerous occasions. I think he says 12. So that's clearly a big part of the investigation of Ed Burke, which has yet to fully reveal itself.
Now, was it in the affidavit that you learned that, I've forgotten all these details, was it in the affidavit that you learned that Danny Solis was wearing the wire?
No. No. We surmised by the fact that that they had come at him 2 years earlier and that they never indicted him, that he probably was cooperating. And sources confirmed to the Sun-Times that Danny Solis, sources close to Danny Solis confirmed that he was cooperating.
Man, I love sources like that can confirm something.
Fran Spielman sources. Fran Spielman is a great reporter.
Fran Spielman is indeed a great reporter, and it wasn't just Fran Spielman. It was as I recall, Tim Novak's been part of this investigation. Gives some love to all these people. The federal court reporter John Seidel has been part of this investigation. Fran Spielman, as we said, and now Marc Brown got in the act with a lot to talk about, which is the story that we're talking about now, talking about the wheeling and the dealing behind the scenes as Danny Solis tried to convince the state of Illinois to sell this lot to the city of Chicago. By the way, it does not, Mark, give me much assurances about the city of Chicago's oversight, that it was considered sort of like a slam dunk for development of the lot. All you had to do was pry the lot from control of the state, get it over the city, boom, the deal would be done.
Well, the city keeps trying to say, even if they'd gotten it, even if they'd sold it to us, then it would still have to go through an RFP process. Now, I believe that Ben Joravsky is an expert in city of Chicago RFP processes and knows how an alderman could steer something like that. And I mean, clearly, these guys wouldn't have invested all this money in this deal if they didn't think that Danny could steer it to them in the end. But it didn't happen. Now, why it didn't happen, I don't know. Clearly, at first, the fact that Madigan was in this from the start would make you think that they tried to run this back at Madigan at some point.
They being, when you say that they mean...
They meaning Danny and the feds tried to steer this back in that direction and see whether he would bite. That's a theory on my part, but it seems logical. And we have no evidence that he did, that he being Madigan, that Madigan got involved in this, but there's a lot we still don't know about this deal.
When Mark used that acronym RFP, Request for Proposal, and yes, it is absolutely one of the great thrills of being a writer, reporter in this town, is watching how when the city supposedly has a wide open to anybody, nobody has a favored lane, they say everybody can submit their proposal and we'll just objectively analyze them. It's somehow or other, more often than not, winds up in the hands of the person that you kind of knew was going to get the deal in the first place. And that's another story from way back when, the Clout Cafe, I remember this very well, was that Millennium Park restaurant. The Sun-Times did a big, huge expose on that one. And I remember somehow or other, a bunch of people, Mark, competed for the right to win that restaurant in Millennium Park. And somehow it was the group that, with the ties, that the Dailies, that ended up getting it.
Guys like Freddie Barbara, there was, yes. And the Daily cousin, and, yes, that's an RFP process.
Yeah, it is an RFP process. Marc Brown is my guest. He's a political columnist for the Chicago Sun-Times. We're going to move on, get a little political talk from Mark, talk about the upcoming mayoral election, Tony Preckwinkle, Lori Lightfoot, right after this.
Hey there, producer Dennis here. Thanks for finding and listening to the brand new Ben Joravsky Show. All right, so here's how this works. The Ben Joravsky Show live streams on the Chicago Sun-Times YouTube channel Tuesday through Friday, 1 until 3 p.m. Once the show is over, you can listen to the replay on our YouTube channel, or we throw it online for you to download by 4 p.m. Where can you download the Ben Joravsky Show, you may be asking yourself? Well, you may be asking yourself a fantastic question. You can find previous Ben Joravsky shows and guest interviews through several outlets. The Chicago Sun-Times online, chicago.suntimes.com, the Chicago Reader online, chicagoreader.com, and wherever else you listen to your favorite podcasts. Apple Podcasts, Google Play, pick one. Just search for The Ben Joravsky Show, J-O-R-A, V as in victory, S-K-Y. So, let's recap. Tuesday through Friday, 1 until 3 p.m., live streamed on the Chicago Sun-Times YouTube channel and downloadable by 4 at chicago.suntimes.com, chicagoreader.com, and wherever else you listen to your favorite podcast. Yes, the Ben Joravsky Show is back. We're live and downloaded. Tell your friends and enjoy the rest of the show. Welcome back to the Ben Joravsky Show. Take it away, Benny J.
All right, Marc Brown is my guest, political columnist and writer for the Chicago Sun-Times. We're talking about a lot to talk about. Marc's story with Tim Novak that ran in Sunday's paper. Another story exclusive in the Sun-Times. Actually, I don't know how exclusive it is, but another story in the Sun-Times. Vrdolyak to plead guilty. Now, we're going back in time here, Marc. You and I, a couple old-timers, remember Eddie Vrdolyak. Fast Eddie was the leader of the anti-Harold Washington coalition of white aldermen and one confused Puerto Rican alderman in the 1980s that did what they could to keep Harold Washington from having control of the city. He's in the news again. This, I think, the second time he's facing federal prosecution for some wrongdoing. Unbelievable. Eddie Vrdolyak. It's like the gift that keeps giving for investigative reporters in the city of Chicago.
I mean, it had reached a point where we thought he was never going to get caught, like some of these other guys that are seem to be lined up right now. And then now we've got him twice in a decade here. And what's weird about this one is it's actually, I mean, it's something stemming from before he went down the first time.
Yeah.
With this, money he made out of the tobacco settlement, which I don't know if you remember, it first came up. It came into the open during, I believe, his sentencing at the, or at least during his sentencing at the after the first trial, and the prosecutors just sort of dropped in one day, and he's getting, $260,000 a year for life from the tobacco settlement, and like none of us had ever heard this before, right? What did he do to earn that?
Yeah.
And we still don't exactly know, except he apparently conned this guy, and either conned the guy, this lawyer in Seattle, or that he could get him the inside track on the deal, or he actually did get him the inside track on the deal.
Is there any chance that we'll know the specifics behind this? How Eddie Vrdolyak, I'm quoting from, what is this? I'm quoting from the indictment, I think. The feds say Soso, that's the other lawyer, and Vrdolyak struck a secret deal with Washington attorney Steve Berman to collect on some of the money, even though Vrdolyak, quote, did no work on the tobacco lawsuit. So this, of course, was the lawsuit filed by all the states against tobacco companies to try to force them to pay up for all the damage cigarettes have done to people down through the years. And the state of Illinois got a windfall. I forget how many hundreds of millions of dollars they got. As a result, to help people, to pay for the insurance costs, what have you, the coverage for people who are sick. By somehow or other, Eddie Vrdolyak got a piece of that pie.
That was better than winning the lottery. I mean, it's like, somehow it goes into the tens of millions of dollars that he got a piece for himself. So, could we find out? I sure hope we do. I mean, it would be a shame if they've taken it this far to not reveal all, but maybe he just takes a plea, and maybe it's not really a bargain. Maybe he just pleads guilty and hopes that by dint of age and health, he doesn't go back to prison again.
Well, the headline is Vrdolyak set to plead guilty. He had been fighting it. Now it seems like he's going to take the plea, perhaps to avoid more time in the federal penitentiary. Is it possible, Marc, in a case like this, that they could seal the records? If the part of the deal would be to seal all information to prevent us from knowing, what the chief allegation is against Vrdolyak, seeing some of the evidence. Is that a possibility?
Well, when somebody has a guilty plea, I mean, all the evidence doesn't come out. You don't have what happens at a trial. They don't seal. I mean, they've made their allegations against him. I mean, it's a very tricky case they brought. It's like the only clearly he's not in trouble for whatever he did in the beginning. He's in trouble because this guy Soso didn't pay his taxes, and Eddie was kicking back to him because I think he had a relationship with the Washington guy, with Berman, and so it's in that. It's really complicated where Eddie, they wanted Eddie to report what he was paying him, and like Eddie should have reported to the IRS. Just really complicated stuff. It's like how they caught Capone on taxes.
Yeah.
Well, they caught Eddie on. They didn't really just like catch him on taxes. They caught him on somebody else's taxes. It's a really convoluted case.
Yeah. And here's a great quote from the story that John Seidel wrote. A member of the city council from 1971 to 1987, Vrdolyak earned the nickname Fast Eddie for his backroom deals and reputation for dancing on the edge of the law. He was known for saying he always assumed anyone he was talking with might be wearing a wire. That's probably a safe assumption, Eddie, if you've talked to Danny Solis in the last several years. Did you ever think Vrdolyak, knowing he had this reputation, Mark, and you were here in the 80s, did you ever think Vrdolyak would be caught not once but twice by the feds?
No, I didn't. And again, I thought he'd skated on this tobacco thing because they brought it up in court that day, and then it went years without anything happening, and before it came back around with the Soso investigation. And this investigation this case is dragged on for years.
Mm-hmm.
And I just thought they were trying to stall out the time. You know how they'll do that sometimes. They'll just run out the time and hope that somebody gives up or whatever. So
Eddie, of course, was a kingpin back in the 80s, leading the opposition to Harold Washington. His chief sidekick was Alderman Ed Burke, Finance Committee chair, and now Burke's up to his neck in trouble with the feds as well.
And I think you and I know. It's not okay. That's when Eddie was the kingpin, but he was still a behind-the-scenes player well after that. Probably up until he finally went down a decade ago, I would say. And he still has a lot of the reputation. His reputation was he controlled judges. I still would guess he still got a lot of loyal judges out there between him and Burke. So. That's he is. I found him to be the most fascinating figure in the time I've been in Chicago.
Why do you say that?
Well, he had the charisma of Sinatra. People love this guy, and he there's just this mystique, the Fast Eddie mystique, that he was always pulling a game, and everybody knew it. They came at him, reporters. They came at him so many times through the years, and they could never quite close the deal. And, at his sentencing the first time, there were hundreds of people wrote in letters of, Eddie did this for him, Eddie did that for him, and some of them prominent people. And as you recall, the judge at the time went for it, He gave him probation, and it took the appeals court to say, "Hey, this guy deserves some time, man."
Yeah.
And then they had to send him away for a little while.
Yeah, Fast Eddie looked like he was going to sneak out of that one too. He got that first judge, you're right, to slap him on the wrist, and then I think it was Judge Posner, if I'm correct, Richard Posner, said, "Come on now, this letter writing campaign, they got hundreds of letters. This is just a classic case of a politician, getting the peoples that he was wheeling and dealing for to write the letters. It's not like he's Mother Teresa here." And then he did serve a little time in the federal. But the allusion to Frank Sinatra, I think, is a very good one, Mark. I always thought it was like the Rat Pack, that the way the reverence so many of the aldermen in the city council had for Vrdolyak, like they were living large by just being with him. And by the way, a couple of them are still around. Ed Burke, finance. He was reelected, 14th Ward, as you know. I think he's lost his chairmanship of the Finance Committee. But the man who replaced him as Finance Committee chair, Patrick O'Connor of the 40th Ward, is in the runoff. So that Vrdolyak legacy is still a bit with us.
I absolutely it is.
All right, that's Marc Brown. Marc, I want to thank you. Before you leave, any early thoughts on Preckwinkle and Lightfoot? Like, the Sun-Times had a story today that a poll, which I'm not quite sure I believe, had Lori up 58 to 30%, and looks like she's going to just mop the floor with him. What's your thoughts on that poll?
I would just tell people that just as the polls in the first go-around were off, at least at this stage, from what happened at this stage in the campaign, I don't think it's a 2-to-1. You know, if it is, God bless. But I don't think people should let that determine how they approach the election, other than to understand that Lori Lightfoot does have a chance, you know, which they didn't understand 2 months ago.
Very good. Marc Brown, thank you much for stopping in. Troy LaRavia is on his way, and the great Steve James is in the studio. We'll tell you all about that in a little bit when we return.
If you would like to advertise with the Ben Joravsky Show, and who wouldn't, contact Tracy Baim at publisher@chicagoreadercorp.com. We have several advertising options for your business or organization, and quite frankly, we would love nothing more than to tell our listeners all about it. Once again, that's Tracy Baim at publisher@chicagoreadercorp, that's CORP as in Paul.com, to advertise with the Ben Joravsky Show, the Chicago Reader, and the Chicago Sun-Times. We look forward to plugging you. Okay, well, that came out kind of weird. More of the Ben Joravsky Show live and downloaded in moments. Hey there, producer Dennis here. Thanks for finding and listening to the brand new Ben Joravsky Show. All right, so here's how this works. The Ben Joravsky Show live streams on the Chicago Sun-Times YouTube channel Tuesday through Friday, 1 until 3 p.m. Once the show is over, you can listen to the replay on our YouTube channel, or we throw it online for you to download by 4 p.m. Where can you download the Ben Joravsky Show, you may be asking yourself? Well, you may be asking yourself a fantastic question. You can find previous Ben Joravsky shows and guest interviews through several outlets: the Chicago Sun-Times online, chicago.suntimes.com, the Chicago Reader online, chicagoreader.com, and wherever else you listen to your favorite podcasts. Apple Podcasts, Google Play, pick one. Just search for the Ben Joravsky Show. J-O-R-A, V as in victory, S-K-Y. So, let's recap. Tuesday through Friday, 1 until 3 p.m., live streamed on the Chicago Sun-Times YouTube channel and downloadable by 4 at chicago.suntimes.com, chicagoreader.com, and wherever else you listen to your favorite podcast. Yes, the Ben Joravsky Show is back. We're live and downloaded. Tell your friends and enjoy the rest of the show. Hey guys, the Ben Joravsky Show, hour number 2 for your Tuesday, March 5th is moments away. But before we get into hour number 2, we want to remind everyone that this show is powered by unions. That's right, these hardworking men and women were kind enough to get behind us in this new venture. So we'd like to thank the following unions for making this show possible: the International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers, not Aerosmith workers, aerospace workers, Local 126 in District 8, the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Local 9, the International Union of Operating Engineers, Local 150. All of those unions, thank you so much for helping make this show possible. And, well, it all wouldn't be possible without the help of one group, the Chicago Federation of Labor. And with that said, the Ben Joravsky Show, hour number 2, begins right now. It is Tuesday, March 5th, and live from the Chicago Sun-Times studio on Racine Avenue, this is the Ben Joravsky Show. In this hour of the program, it's President of the Chicago Principals Association, the one, the only, Mr. Troy LaRavia. And now your host, yes, president of nothing, Chicago Reader columnist, Ben Joravsky.
I'll have you know I was president of the White Sox fan club. All right?
So
Actually,
sorry.
I was not president of the White Sox. I wasn't even president of that.
Oh, Lord.
I was a member of the White Sox fan club back in 1972 at Everson High School.
I don't think too many fact checkers will be out there on that white. You could have lied right
I
there.
could have said it. Yeah, I was president. It was a really heated, contested election, but I was victorious. Nope, wasn't president. I think the president was a guy named Marc, if I recall. Don't hold me to that.
Marc
all right?
Brown?
No, not. By the way, Marc Brown, if you want to hear more Marc Brown, he will be appearing with Mary Mitchell, Rosanna Marquez from AARP, and Mays Jackson. Yeah, that Mays Jackson.
All right.
Hey, Mays, what's going on? WVON AM. I knew Mays Jackson before he was Mays Jackson.
Who was he?
He was just not like Mays Jackson.
Oh, okay.
He was just, I'm Mays Jackson. Mays Jackson, of course, superstar talk show host at WVON AM 1690. And they will be doing a forum. What is this? I'm reading this really quickly. Join the Chicago Sun-Times at one of our upcoming Hear Our Voice community forums and dive even deeper into Chicago politics. The first forum is Wednesday, March 13th from 7 to 9 p.m. at the DuSable Museum of African American History in Hyde Park. Mary Mitchell, Marc Brown, Mays Jackson. Tell Mays Ben said hi. All right? Mays was like, who?
Huh?
No, Mays, when he had a show, he had me on the show a couple times. Anyway, what you got for me, young man?
All right, it's that time of the program where we go to you. And yes, I'm talking to you, the Ben Joravsky Show listener. How's it going, listeners? Yeah? All right, cool. Ben, let's check our social media pages here, see what the people are saying. First off, we asked all of you on our Facebook and Twitter pages, at Benny J Show on Twitter, with Bernie Sanders making his visit on Sunday. Are we still feeling the burn? In 2019.
Yeah.
Now, judging by that enormous crowd of people who showed up to Navy Pier, the answer is obvious for the Chicagoland area, but we have some interesting comments to read from the listeners. Now, of course, we had responses like our Facebook friend Michael. Are you still feeling the burn in 2019? Michael posted, totally. Simple. How about Shauna's comment?
Okay.
Shauna puts, oh, hell yes, and that's capital Y-A-S-S, hell yes. Our friend Otis puts it right out there. Otis says Bernie Sanders would make a great commander-in-chief. We also had some, indifferent responses, like John's comment, are you still feeling the burn in 2019? John posts, not really. But if he wins the primary, he definitely has my vote in the general election. So, meh,
All right,
says John.
Thanks for nothing, Bernie would say. You got to win the primary to get your vote?
No, thanks for nothing. All right, let's read Margaret's comment. Hey, Margaret, how's it going? Margaret's, this is a very interesting comment here. Margaret puts, canvassed for Bernie in 4 states last time, but I'm taking a pass this time. I have no idea why he voted against sanctions for Russia, but that left me cold. That said, if he's the nominee, I'll vote for him because, well, if I have to explain it, you're really not paying attention. So that's Margaret's response there. And here, Ben, I'd like for you to respond to these statements. We have some friends on Facebook who are indeed not feeling the burn in 2019. Our dear friend and fellow lover of FDR, Heidi Henry.
Oh, Heidi Henry, yep.
Yeah, she simply says, nope.
She ran for state senate. Yeah, Heidi. So she says, that's it? Nope.
That's just a simple nope. Here's Don's response. If he's feeling the burn in 2019, Don puts his comment about not wanting to hear from Hillary kind of pissed me off. And here's where Don takes the gloves off. He puts arrogant old coot who likes being coddled with private jets while talking about the working poor. And finally, Van's comment. Van puts he's not the strongest candidate when he refuses to acknowledge some of his ideas. Simply will not work. So, are we still feeling the burn in 2019? That's the question we are asking you on our Facebook page. Ben Joravsky, spell that last name.
Jorav as in victory, as my beloved Bulls did not do on Sunday. SKY.
And at Benny J Show on Twitter. We'll be reading your comments all throughout the week, so send us your thoughts. Yay, nay, meh. Whatever the response, we'd love to hear it, and who knows, we may read it on the air.
All right, very good. My guest in the studio, Troy LaRavia. He's the head of Chicago Principals Association. And Troy, first of all, welcome back. Welcome back, Cotter.
Thanks, man. Thanks. Good to be here.
And Troy was a regular on my old show. And part of the reason, I'm just going to put it out there, that Troy was a regular on my old show is I really respected this man. In 2014, he took a bold stand against the way the Chicago public schools were run, and the fact that there was no real oversight, and they implemented crazy privatization schemes that left the schools dirtier than ever. He wrote a editorial in the Chicago Sun-Times, where I am right now, about it, denouncing it, and one thing led to another, and he got fired for being too outspoken from his principalship at Blaine Elementary. I'm doing this all from memory.
Oh, yeah.
And since then, I've learned what it's like to be fired for being a little outspoken. So I think we're like, brothers in that respect, Troy.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I have to say, when I left the mayor's race 4 months ago, and I have not participated in any political discussion, any interviews. I got called by all the candidates. I politely said no to every one of them and went back to a very private life, just, doing my, focusing on my work. And I intended to stay that way. And then I got a call from Ben Joravsky, the only reporter in Chicago that I cannot say no to. So now I had to go, because I've been paying attention, because I'm like, we're screwed. So now I have to go study up on the issues so I can sound like I have some intelligence when you interview me. But yeah, I can't say no to Ben because I highly respect his work, his writing. I really love what you do, man. So I had to come in and pay respects.
All right, I appreciate that. I only had to bug him like 45 times. But actually, the last time I saw you and talked to you, we were doing election night remote from a restaurant on Belmont in Chicago, and you came on, and that's when you alluded that you probably weren't going to run. And just to update some folks, maybe they don't know this, but Troy, as I call him, was the original gangster. He was, I think, the first person to announce that he was going to be running against Rahm. I called the candidates who were in the race before Rahm dropped, the original gangsters. Everybody got in after that. Okay, we look late to the party here. Tell folks one more time, just to catch them up, why you decided not to make the run.
Many reasons. One, you need three things to run a good campaign. You need a message, you need money, and you need an organized, for lack of a better way to put it, it's a horrible word to use in Chicago, but machine. Message, money, machine. Mm-hmm. And machine means the volunteers, the people that will go door to door. And we had an incredible message. We had better message than anybody out there. Our money, not quite as good. I mean, we raised $100,000 over the course of the campaign. For someone like me, that's not small change. But it was the machine part that we really lacked on, in terms of the people. And ultimately, this is my fault. I mean, I can blame it on the people who were responsible for that aspect of it, but ultimately I brought them in. So it always comes down to the candidate. But we just did not have the level. We had, for example, a list of about 600 volunteers that was sat on for about 6 months until the day before petitions were due. Mm-hmm. That kind of thing. Like you just, but again, I let those people control that. And, it came back to haunt me in terms of getting folks out there to do the petitioning. But I had a moment that I haven't talked about a lot where again, with the messaging, I was doing a meet and greet, and it was at Open Outcry in Beverly. Mm-hmm. It was packed, very diverse audience, and I was killing it, Ben. And I got to this point where in the talk, I did like a little 10, 15-minute talk, where I said, people ask me, Troy, do you really believe that you can go into City Hall and end this corruption? Do you think that you have the capacity to stop this corrupt, wasteful system? Do you think you can do it? And I stood there and I said, truthfully, no. I don't think I can do it. But I know we can. I know for an absolute fact that we can. We organize ourselves. But the one thing I didn't say in my sort of heart of hearts is that I came to this conclusion that there is no we. Like, there is no organized left with an agenda to stop that nonsense. Like, the left is divided, if it even exists at all at this point. It's just a bunch of warring camps with their own sort of very sort of particular agendas. And we haven't gotten the Republicans, the right's not like that. It's somehow, I don't know how they do it, but you hear the same messaging from them. It's universal. You hear it. I don't know where they meet to agree on what the hell they're gonna do, but what they do it.
Yeah.
You know, they have their right to work agenda. They make it. We don't have a we, and so I decided that I was going to go back and start doing some of the grassroots work of building a we, and starting with the Principals Association, getting back to that work. And so that's what so when I said I left politics, I got off social media, it was to focus on becoming an organizer and doing that grassroots work of helping to organize people. So,
well, when you say there is no we and that the left is divided into warring camps, are you speaking specifically about the left in the city of Chicago, or are you speaking generally about the left throughout the country?
I don't know if I mean, in some instances I might call it warring, but I don't know if I use the word warring. I mean, they just have their own particular focus that like people aren't coming together to see a bigger picture and act together. I mean, I made a point when I left the race that one of the things that disappointed me was not that the left didn't come together to support me. The left didn't come together to support any candidate. Like, to get a candidate who has their best interests and who believes in what they believe in on the ballot. Like, there was no we, is my point. I don't know if I'd call it warring. In some instances they're warring, in some they might not be, but they haven't coalesced to become a we that gets a we agenda done.
All right, so you're speaking specifically about the city of Chicago when
Yes,
you're
I'm
talking
speaking
about this.
about Chicago.
All right, and so what are some of the factors that have led to this division? When you sit back and you look at the state of Chicago politics, progressive politics in the city of Chicago, is it just personality disputes? Or is it just rivalries, jealousies? I mean, why do you attribute the fact that the left can't coalesce in the most democratic city, or one of the most democratic cities in the country?
It's a good question. I mean, the honest answer is I don't know. I think it's probably a mix of many of the things that you just mentioned. I think you also have to realize that there are always active efforts on the right to divide the left. There are always active efforts to point out divisions and turn progressives against one another. That's happening. I mean, I don't know if, the COINTELPRO was real, right? And it's still real. It may go by a different name, but business interests and the government officials who work on their behalf actively work to, create divisions amongst people who have a more progressive agenda so that they can't coalesce. And I think oftentimes we fall victim to it. And, when I, and I'm not going to mention any names, when I left, I didn't mention a soul in my statement when I left. Mm-hmm. But this newspaper that you work for took that statement and turned it into, their interpretation of it as a slight against another candidate. My statement was about me, So once again, and then people who supported that candidate fell hook, line, and sinker for it. Oh, Troy's against so-and-so, right? And not even going to read it for themselves, right? And so we live in a culture, political culture, and a media culture that seem to be geared toward creating those kinds of divisions amongst, whether it be the left, COINTELPRO in particular, in that instance was...
Just explain to people what COINTELPRO is.
Counterintelligence program. It was... So in 1972, there was a group of activists in a town in Pennsylvania called Media, Pennsylvania, interestingly enough, right? And a lot of strange things were going on in the activist community. And they had a sense that they were being infiltrated, that they were agent provocateurs amongst them. And so this group who organized themselves, called the Citizens Organized to Investigate the FBI, broke into an FBI office and stole thousands of FBI files and released them to the press. And the files documented what then became, after it was became known, then Congress got involved and forced more files to be released, and the FBI basically had a program designed to destroy progressive organizations and black progressive organizations in particular. Yeah.
And by the way, there's a great documentary about this. I can't remember the name of it right now. We have some you guys remember the name of the documentary? No? Steve, do you know the name of it?
I know if you watch Eyes on the Prize, which is a very lengthy series, if you look at Eyes on the Prize 2, episode 6, I think. It's called the episode called A Nation of Law, ? A Nation of Law, ? That episode documents what the FBI did to the Black Panther Party here in Chicago.
Yes. All right,
Troy
LaRavia is my guest. We're going to get into the specifics of the upcoming mayoral race, Tony Preckwinkle versus Lori Lightfoot, when we return.
The Ben Joravsky Show is brought to you by the Chicago Sun-Times. For the latest in Chicago and Illinois news, sports, weather, and the latest in national news from a real Chicago frame of mind and real Chicago writers, check out the Chicago Sun-Times. Read the daily paper or online at chicago.suntimes.com. And hey, if you have a little extra cash, subscribe. And by the Chicago Reader. For a deeper dive in the daily Chicago news and for all of what's going on in this city, you gotta read the Reader. Music, arts and culture, film, extensive event calendars, concert listings, and more, including weekly political columns from writers like Maya Dukmasova and, yes, our very own Ben Joravsky. The Chicago Reader is free in newsstands and at chicagoreader.com. That's chicagoreader.com. Hey there, producer Dennis here. Thanks for finding and listening to the brand new Ben Joravsky Show. All right, so here's how this works. The Ben Joravsky Show live streams on the Chicago Sun-Times YouTube channel Tuesday through Friday, 1 until 3 p.m. Once the show is over, you can listen to the replay on our YouTube channel, or we throw it online for you to download by 4 p.m. Where can you download the Ben Joravsky Show, you may be asking yourself? Well, you may be asking yourself a fantastic question. You can find previous Ben Joravsky shows and guest interviews through several outlets. The Chicago Sun-Times online, chicago.suntimes.com, the Chicago Reader online, chicagoreader.com, and wherever else you listen to your favorite podcasts. Apple Podcasts, Google Play, pick one. Just search for The Ben Joravsky Show. J-O-R-A, V as in victory, S-K-Y. So, let's recap. Tuesday through Friday, 1 until 3 p.m. Live streamed on the Chicago Sun-Times YouTube channel and downloadable by 4 at chicago.suntimes.com, chicagoreader.com, and wherever else you listen to your favorite podcast. Yes, the Ben Joravsky Show is back. We're live and downloaded. Tell your friends and enjoy the rest of the show. Welcome back to the Ben Joravsky Show, live from the Chicago Sun-Times.
Troy LaRavia is my guest in the studio. He was the original gangster, the first one to declare against Rahm in the run for mayor. He was challenging Rahm from the left. Troy, of course, Bernie Sanders delegate in 2016, very much a progressive. Troy, everybody's a progressive these days. My humble opinion, the words really lost all meaning in the city of Chicago, but everybody's a progressive. Everybody's running a progressive campaign these days. What's your thoughts on the use of the word progressive?
So, I mean, progressive denotes two things for me. There's two things you have to look at. Like, one, your policy stances, and two, of your record of actually having some integrity with those stances and your actions. Mm-hmm. And very few people have that. One of the reasons I got out of the race and didn't back anybody because they failed every single candidate failed in one of those two things. They either had the stances, but had a record and made some decisions that said this is not a progressive or someone who has the integrity to live up to these things they're saying, or they just don't have the record of being for For example, universal health care, for open, transparent budgeting practices, for taxing, putting the tax burden, the heaviest tax burden on those who had the greatest capacity to meet that tax burden, progressive taxation. And they might have been for it, but didn't seem to have the political will or stomach or capacity to take the kind of hard policy stances to push it. Preckwinkle, for example, she might believe in progressive taxation, but that's not what the soda tax is, right? And I have to say, when she came in, nobody criticized her harder than I did. You look at the comments of the people when she entered the race. Nobody came as hard as I did. But one of the things I did not mention in my criticism was the soda tax, because I don't believe in attacking people on something just for a matter of convenience, because when it got passed, even though I didn't like it, my own personal opinion was, look, if I have to pay a few extra cents or another quarter for some pop so that somebody who doesn't have health insurance can get some care at the county, I'll go ahead and do it. I think there probably could have been better ways to do it. I think she should have fought for something more progressive that pushed the burden on those who are more able to afford it. But that means a political battle needs to take place. That means there's going to be some resistance, and hell, she couldn't even get support for the tax on this one. It means there has to be an organized left behind her to say, if you go for this, we got your back. And I think she, as a politician, knows that there is no organized left behind her that will have her back, that if she goes out there and pushes more progressive taxation, she'll be doing it by herself, and we're going to leave her out there to dry. But again, I'm not saying she's right for that. It's certainly not the stance. You've seen the way I operate. I do what I think is the right thing. Consequences be damned. And I didn't see any politician out there who had that kind of mentality, who was going to push for something progressive and not necessarily the safe thing.
All right, let's break them both down. We'll start with Tony, since you raised her first, and we'll get to Lori later. You said when Tony first entered the race, no one was more critical of her than you, but you did not specifically criticize her on the soda pop tax. Right. So what were you critical about her on?
Her record of voting for the daily budgets that got us into the financial situation that we're in right now. The fact that when the whole city of Chicago progressives were practically begging her to run against Rahm Emanuel, and she failed to do so twice, and only came in the race after he had left. That said, you either agreed with the way he was running the city and didn't want to run against him, or you didn't have the political courage to run against him. One of those two things has to be true, and for me, it didn't matter which one was true. I knew I wasn't going to be supporting, at least at that stage, anyone for which one of those things were true. And so those are the two major things that my critique was based on: her failing to step up to the plate and exercise the political courage to go against Rahm when we wanted her to. Barrios. That was the third thing. Her support of Joe Barrios. The quote that I said was that her loyalty and commitment to the Democratic Party was stronger than her loyalty and commitment to the people of Chicago. And I chose those words very carefully. I said stronger. Not that she doesn't have any loyalty or commitment to the people of Chicago. I believe that, like most Democratic politicians, their loyalty and commitment to their party is stronger than their loyalty and commitment to us. And, I don't know if Lightfoot's any better. All right,
let's get into it. By the way, just so people know, there's some folks out there might not know, Joe Barrios was the former assessor for Cook County, and for years and years and years, and it came out, investigation by ProPublica and the Chicago Tribune, got to give the Tribune credit, that the way our property tax system was assessed in the city of Chicago, a greater burden was placed on people in neighborhoods where least afford it, in poor, low-income, working-class black neighborhoods, as opposed to the gentrifying upscale North Side neighborhoods.
And despite that, Preckwinkle continued to support him, even after that was on front-page news on the Tribune for 3 different editions, just how horrible his assessment taxation practices were and how they impacted negatively, particularly at poor people and African-American poor people in particular, she continued to support him. But, you know, he was the Democratic Party. I don't know if in her heart of hearts she wished she didn't have to, but this is where my bread is buttered. You know, but all I knew was what she did, and so that's what I commented on. That said, my wife worked for both Rahm and Tony. She worked for the city of Chicago, and she worked under Preckwinkle, pretty close to Preckwinkle, not so close to Rahm, but close to the people he appointed. And, you know, she didn't talk a lot about it, but I got a clear sense that it was like day and night, that Rahm's folks were incompetent, that the people were, everything was political, and that what Tony was trying to do at the county was actually put some competent people in place to do the job of serving the taxpayers appropriately. And generally ran a tight ship. Again, I'm not looking for perfection, but when you're running against somebody, and at that point I'm running against her, I came out hard and highlighted the 3 things that I thought people should have a second thought about when they consider her.
All right, let's get to Lori Lightfoot. What's your general thoughts about Lori Lightfoot?
I was never impressed by Lori. You know, Lori and I were in lots of forums together. Tony and I never participated in a forum together because I left as she was coming in. Lori and I participated in quite a few forums, and I was never impressed by Lori. There was always these sort of lofty statements about being the North Star of Chicago. I just never heard anything specific from her. It was a lot of platitudes coming from her, and that's a warning sign for me. Her lack of, you know, again, not supporting universal health care. You know, there was an interview with Progressive Magazine called me. They had just interviewed Lori Lightfoot, and apparently Lori Lightfoot's press person called Progressive to pitch Lori as the next Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez.
I remember this, yeah.
And so they asked Lori, okay, how do you feel about universal health care, Medicare for all? No. How do you feel about getting rid of Chicago gang database? No. And there was another one, abolishing ICE. No. It's just like, wait, you're pitching yourself as the next Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, but you don't believe in the progressive policies that she's pushing. And so they're like, well, who else is running for me? So they called me and asked me the same questions, you know, and I gave them my answers, and they put out a whole piece about the difference between those answers. And so again, those 3 policies are progressive policies. Going back to your first question, what is a progressive in terms of looking at Lori Lightfoot? Certainly doesn't seem like one. And then you look at her career, you know, and it's mixed. You have her time on the police board, where it looks like, you know, convictions or discipline for officers increased under her. But then you have some cases in there that are profoundly questionable, where she overturned the board on one officer who was found to, where the evidence showed he put a muzzle to a guy's head and blew his brains out. And the board itself declared that the shooting was unjustified, and then she went and got that thing reversed. So, you know, there's a lot of questionable decisions and actions like that on Lori's part that make me go, no, this is just too much of a risk here. Like, you have a lot of lofty language, but when I look at your record, you know, if I look at Preckwinkle's record, it's pretty goddamn consistent with what she says. Right? She may not say the things I want, but it's pretty damn consistent with what she says. Look at Lightfoot's record, not quite as much.
It seems as though you're getting yourself ready to vote for Tony Preckwinkle. Am I reading this correctly?
I haven't decided yet, but if I had to do it today, that's where I'm leaning.
Who'd you vote for in this last one?
Tony Preckwinkle. Yeah. And that was one of those hold your nose votes. It's like, I don't have my perfect candidate. My Bernie's not here.
There was no burn to feel on this one, huh?
There's no burn to feel in the Chicago mayoral election.
Whether this is fair or not, I'm going to say this. Many younger progressive types, millennials, they call me up. They're critical of Lori Lightfoot because she was a federal prosecutor. And it boils down to this. More than one person of the millennial persuasion has told me that she is, quote unquote, a cop. All right? They call her a cop. Even though Lori Lightfoot has never been a police officer, has never served at the Chicago Police Department.
But you know what they mean when they say that.
Yes. They're speaking metaphorically, I think.
Yeah. I mean, she prosecuted in the height of the mass incarceration, and mass incarceration was based on drug policy for the most part. And she prosecuted drug offenses, you know. And now you're going to say, like, at some point, you have to know what you're doing when you're doing that. When you're sending one black person after another to prison as a prosecutor, and at some point, either your conscience, you know. When I was a principal, I had to have that moment where I had to take a risk. I risked my career to say this is wrong. You know, you have to have that moment where what you believe and what you're being at, you realize what you believe and what you're being asked to do are not congruent. And you're either going to continue to do it and not take any risk in order to ensure that people get some kind of justice, or you're going to leave that alone to make sure that you continue to get your bread buttered. And it seems like that's what she did. And now that it's popular to talk about mass incarceration, she said, oh, this is horrible. What were you saying when you were putting all these people in prison?
All right, well, in defense of Lori Lightfoot, I'm not going to say something in defense of Lori Lightfoot. She is not part and parcel in any way, Troy. I think you'll have to agree with me this, of the Democratic machine that's so involved in the corruption in the city of Chicago, in the inequities of the city of Chicago, in just all those bad budgets that you were just alluding to, parking meter sales, TIF deals. I mean, you at least got to give her that. She's not part of that in any way. She's a complete outsider in that regard. So
I can't give her, you can't really give her that because there's no record. You don't know what she's going to do because all of those things, like those weren't the politicians pushing those things. Those were the people supporting the politicians, right? Those were the banks, the investors, the school privatizers. Those are the forces behind the Democratic machine. Yeah. And those forces are still going to be at play when she becomes mayor. She's never been tested against them. And based on her history or lack of a history, I don't necessarily think she's going to react much differently than the existing politicians to those forces when they come to bear on her.
All right, that's Troy LaRavia. I'm Ben Joravsky. Willie Wilson has just walked into the studio, ladies and gentlemen. I don't know who else is going to come in. Maybe Rahm Emanuel is coming up the elevator right now. But we're going to have Willie Wilson with Troy LaRavia in the studio. It's going to be great when we return.
Hey there, producer Dennis here. Thanks for finding and listening to the brand new Ben Joravsky Show. All right, so here's how this works. The Ben Joravsky Show live streams on the Chicago Sun-Times YouTube channel Tuesday through Friday, 1 until 3 p.m. Once the show is over, you can listen to the replay on our YouTube channel, or we throw it online for you to download by 4 p.m. Where can you download the Ben Joravsky Show, you may be asking yourself? Well, you may be asking yourself a fantastic question. You can find previous Ben Joravsky shows and guest interviews through several outlets. The Chicago Sun-Times online, chicago.suntimes.com, the Chicago Reader online, chicagoreader.com, and wherever else you listen to your favorite podcasts. Apple Podcasts, Google Play, pick one. Just search for The Ben Joravsky Show, J-O-R-A, V as in victory, S-K-Y. So, let's recap. Tuesday through Friday, 1 until 3 p.m. Live streamed on the Chicago Sun-Times YouTube channel and downloadable by 4 at chicago.suntimes.com, chicagoreader.com, and wherever else you listen to your favorite podcast. Yes, the Ben Joravsky Show is back. We're live and downloaded. Tell your friends and enjoy the rest of the show. Commercial break over. Welcome back to the Ben Joravsky Show, live from the Chicago Sun-Times.
Yes, indeed. We are live from the Chicago Sun-Times. Troy LaRavia is my guest in the studio. And all of a sudden, knock, knock on the door. And who walks in? But Willie Wilson, the man, the myth, the legend himself, who just ran for mayor of the city of Chicago. He was one of the original gangsters, along with Troy LaRavia. Some of the candidates had the guts to run against Mayor Rahm and run for mayor when Mayor Rahm was in the race. It was supposed to be here Thursday, but you know what, Willie? I'm happy to have you sharing the mic, sharing the space with Troy.
And so is Troy.
Yeah, and so is Troy.
Hey, I'm on it, you know. Just still working hard, you know.
All right, Willie. I got the press releases that Scott sent, your dutiful press agent there, who's standing in the corner. And it says that you're about to come out with some aldermanic endorsements and a mayoral endorsement. So let's start with the big news, mayoral endorsement. Troy says he's leaning toward Tony Preckwinkle. We just talked about that. Of the two candidates, which one are you going to endorse?
Don't know yet. Listen, my own personal views is one thing. But you may or may not have heard that I won all the.
I may have heard that, Willie. I think Scott may have sent me that press release once or twice.
Yeah, you may not have heard that. I won all the different awards.
You won the West Side and the South Side.
Yeah, I think the first time in history, I believe. You know, so they're out there, and so I decided that I was going to send out a poll. The people who voted for me. See what they say. Right now, I'm traveling around the city. Yesterday, we met with 200-300 ministers. Tonight, we meet with more. Just left some now. And we got community organization giving their input. And after they get their input, that's the way we're going to go. Friday at 1:30.
I see. So you haven't made your decision yet. You're collecting intel, as they say in the business, and you're going to make your decision based on all the information you get.
Yeah, but that's the right thing to do. Now, I must say this, too. Most of the people, I'd say 98 or 99% of the people just say for me to make the decision. They'll follow me, and they're waiting on me. So I thought that, no, I don't want to do that. Let me get the input first. After I get the input, then I'll put it together and do it Friday. Meanwhile, we're just going to take the night and endorse some of the people in the runoff, ultimately, stuff like that. Probably, I think there's about 14 in the runoff now. And so we're going to do that tonight. But Friday's be the moment. But whoever I endorse going to be the next mayor of the city of Chicago.
Why do you say that?
I'm confident. I just know. I got to feel. Like you said that I wasn't going to win in these wars.
Yeah.
You remember you said that?
Yeah. Did I say that?
Yeah, you were
Wait,
wrong,
you're like throwing things up. I don't remember what I said. I say a lot of things. Let's pay back the tape on that one, Willie Wilson. I don't remember saying that, but whatever.
Well, you didn't think I'd be up in the top 5 or anything, stuff like that.
I do not recall ever saying anything. I may have said it. I may have changed.
I didn't have a chance,
Okay. Yeah, I think you're mixing me up with Al Pacino. Okay, a lot of people think I look like Al Pacino.
Well, I'm glad you got a promotion, though.
Yes, that's a good way of looking at it. The last time I talked to Willie, I was in a different place in my life. Troy, let me ask you a question about Willie Wilson now that he's in the room. Were you surprised by the strong vote he got from the West and the South Side?
Yes. I remembered last time, what was it, about 10, 11%? In 2015?
Yeah. It was around about 11 to 12%. I think. Don't cheat me, you know.
And so when I saw, and that was when it was. I think you were the only black candidate in there.
In 2015.
Yeah.
Oh my God, I just blanked. There was Rahm, there was Chewy, there was Willie Wilson, Bob Fioretti. Doing this from memory.
That's another black guy.
What was about it?
Doc Wall.
Doc Walls was in that race. Yeah.
And so when I saw this time that there were a lot more black candidates, I thought it would eat into his 11, 12, 10%, and that he'd probably end up with like 5. So I'll admit, I never said it publicly, but in my own head, I thought that was what was going to happen. And I was shocked when I saw he maintained his, like, Willie Wilson voters are Willie Wilson voters.
Yeah.
So he maintained his percentage.
Willie, why do you think you have this loyalty among voters in the city of Chicago?
I think I know it, that it's from the work that I do in the community. Look, I spent close to $2 million of my own money. And prior to that, I give away $2 or $3 million a year just to people in the neighborhood who don't have IDs to cash a check, who need food. I give away maybe $300 or $400 on the street that people are homeless, you know. But not only that, we support the churches, community organizations, and things of that nature. People haven't forgotten, and I never have wanted nothing for myself. You know, I just do it so that it's out there. But I can say now that I represent the black community. Yeah, for the vote.
I do remember one of the times you were on my show asking you about your alliances with Bruce Rauner. I teased you mercifully about that one because he did throw you under the bus, and voting for Trump. And yet it seems as though, as unpopular as Rauner and Trump are among black voters, not just in the city of Chicago, but nationwide, they did not hold that against you.
No. Why would they? I'm myself, my own person. You know,
I held it against you.
Fine.
I just want to put that on.
Look, the one thing about myself, look, you can't go wrong when you do good, right? So when people don't like me or say this and that about me, what I do, I just say, look, I'm still gonna love you, all right? And you remember this here too. People always say that this here, that, oh, he can't be mayor, he can't run here and that because he can't talk. And I tell them what I tell them. I say I signed in front of my check, they sign the back of theirs.
Yeah. I've been quoting you on that one, Willie, for about a year now.
All right.
I wish I signed in front of a check once.
Which one you rather be?
Yeah,
you know?
the front. No.
Look, people talk and look. I never had deny. I'm from Louisiana and from the 7th grade education, but I think I make more money than those who have a good education. A little bit more.
Yeah, you made a lot more money than I have, that's for sure. Troy, let me ask you this question. I just asked Willie. He supported Donald Trump, voted for Donald Trump, I should say. He had his reasons for it. We're not going to go through all that again. And he had that alliance with Bruce Rauner, and yet he did get overwhelming support. He got strong support on the west side and the south side. How do you attribute that?
Well, one, frankly, I don't think most folk know. I mean, if you show up at the debates, that's how I found out because I was standing at a forum 2 people down from Willie Wilson, and they were asking us who we voted for, and I just happened to be at the forum, and he says Trump and Rauner, and I go, that's how I found out. I don't think most people know. And matter of fact, I've had conversations with people like, did you know he voted for Trump and Rauner? What? Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
I don't think it was out there. Now, whether or not it would have impacted, we can only guess. But I'm certain that 95 to 99% of the folks, that 10% had no idea.
Well, I guarantee that if you had made it to the runoff, that would have been the first attack commercial that would have been aired by Tony or Lori, whoever you would be running against. You know, it would be the ominous voice. He voted for Trump.
You know what? But I don't think people look at it that way. You know, the ones who do, well, that's fine. But people look at if they're hungry and I can give them food without wanting anything back, appreciate it, right? I don't look at it that way. You know, I voted for, Bruce because he promised me that what he would do for the community, right? I voted for the other governor 2 times in a row. He did not deliver these conversations we had. And I remember, I didn't ask for anything for myself. We didn't even do business with the state, nothing like that, all right? So we didn't ask for that, all right? But if what you do, you look at a person and you vote for that person, all right? And when you talk about Republican, wasn't Abraham Lincoln Republican?
Yes, he was. You got to go back a long way. I think the last time you said that to me, Willie.
Yeah, Abraham Lincoln was Republican, all right?
Yeah, he was.
So are you going to condemn him because he was Republican?
No.
One of the best president in the United States.
We're not condemning Rauner because he's a Republican.
Yeah.
We're condemning Rauner because he starved the state for 2 years and had policies that actually, I would listen to Ralph, I think it was Ralph, I forgot, Robert Martwick. Mm-hmm. And he stood up one day at a public event and said, people are dead because of Bruce Rauner. This is a state representative. Mm-hmm. People are dead because of this man's policy. So, it's not because, not because he's a Republican. It's your actions showed almost no regard for human beings, and they also show that you consider the biggest city in the state that you govern, you treat it like it's another state. Like it's not part of the state you're governing, but some rival or some enemy. Mm-hmm. Like you're not governor of it. Like this isn't part of what you govern. That's how he treated us. And so that's why I think people would hold a vote for Rauner against anybody who voted for him.
Yeah. They voted for Ron Emanuel, who covered up Laquan McDonald, got shot 16 times. Governor, he wasn't in a conspiracy to shot a person 16 times. Ron Emanuel didn't do good in the job, the contract, the schools, and things of that nature. I mean, what the heck, you know? Look, the mayor right now of the city of Chicago should be investigated and put in jail. All right?
Now that we agree on.
All right? All right? But the problem is that nobody said nothing about that, right?
Well, there's something else I think you may agree on. I'd like to try to get your thoughts on this. This was a quintessential Willie Wilson moment. It was at Grassroots Collaborative Forum that was held at a church on the west side, Willie, and they passed out green cards and red cards to the people in the audience. And so the tradition is that when you hear something that the candidate says that you agree with, you raise the green card. And when you hear something that you strikes you the wrong way that a candidate says, you raise the red card. Willie Wilson, at that particular forum, did not mention voting for Bruce Rauner or Donald Trump, but what he did mention, and he came out strongly about, was his opposition to red light cameras. And red light cameras become a symbol, Troy, and I know you know this, about the regressive ways in which the city of Chicago is trying to squeeze more revenue out of the people who can least afford it. People lose their cars. Yeah. They get dispossessed. Do you know how many green cards went up the air when Willie said that? I was like, oh, Willie Wilson's pretty popular on the west side. And I mean,
right. South side, too. I mean, that's a big issue with the red light cameras. You know, that was a part of a commercial I put out, the Rom Get the Hell Out commercial. That was one of the big issues that I ran on. Putting some progressive revenue in place and using that progressive revenue to get rid of regressive revenue, like the red light cameras. Now, I'm not, I don't know if I'm for getting rid of every single camera. I know there are traffic experts that say there's a certain percentage of them. If you put the timing on them right and you distribute them evenly throughout the places where they actually need to go, because I believe in, listening to experts. And not just going with what public opinion says is, you should do to get votes. But there would have certainly, under LaRaviere administration, been a significant reduction in those things. And they certainly would have been distributed, if at all, around the city, been distributed a lot more representatively in terms of the different race and income areas of the city.
Troy LaRavia is in the studio, and Willie Wilson, a surprise guest, walked into the studio. Glad to have the two of them there. I get this picture. I'm going to put it all on Facebook and Instagram. They're sitting right next to each other in our nice little Sun-Times studio here. Willie, you had a quote in the Sun-Times the other day. I think it was the Sun-Times, may have been the Tribune, regarding reaching out to your supporters, your constituents, et cetera, to see who they wanted to support for mayor. And there was the issue of Lori Lightfoot being openly gay. And that, I think the quote was, it's a hard sell for many of the churchgoers that support you. Elaborate a little bit on that.
Well, I met with, first of all, I met with both Tony Preckwinkle about an hour and a half. I met with Lori Lightfoot probably about 4 hours. And we had some deep conversation. There is an issue, open, gay and lesbian. I know there's another letter for it, but, I don't know them all. And I said openly, all right. There's an issue. And also, at one point in my life, there was an issue for me, too, I told her that. And I tell the world the whole thing, all right. Because, see, like, we believe the scripture a lot, all right. But the same token, as I've been relating to the ministers, I met with a lot of them this past week and 2 weeks, is that let's judge a person on economic and social issues. Whatever person decides to do with their own personal life is their own business, all right? And I just came from a meeting today talking the same thing. All of the pastors that I know of and talked to have said, look, whatever you go with, give us a word, all right? I think that a human being is a human being. Look, what's the difference than being two sins and two sins? If you tell a lie, it's sin. Kill somebody, it's sin. So what we have to do is get beyond that. Let's think about the schools and the economic part of it and the fairness. And so that's why I've told everybody, I said this, do not judge, as a friend of mine told me the other day, do not judge gender, but judge the agenda. And that's how we come with it.
That's Willie Wilson. Troy LaRavia is also in the studio. We'll be right back after this.
Hey there, Producer Dennis here. Thanks for finding and listening to the brand new Ben Joravsky Show. All right, so here's how this works. The Ben Joravsky Show live streams on the Chicago Sun-Times YouTube channel Tuesday through Friday, 1 until 3 p.m. Once the show is over, you can listen to the replay on our YouTube channel, or we throw it online for you to download by 4 p.m. Where can you download the Ben Joravsky Show, you may be asking yourself? Well, you may be asking yourself a fantastic question. You can find previous Ben Joravsky shows and guest interviews through several outlets. The Chicago Sun-Times Online, chicago.suntimes.com, the Chicago Reader Online, chicagoreader.com, and wherever else you listen to your favorite podcasts. Apple Podcasts, Google Play, pick one. Just search for The Ben Joravsky Show. J-O-R-A, V as in victory, S-K-Y. So, let's recap. Tuesday through Friday, 1 until 3 p.m. Live streamed on the Chicago Sun-Times YouTube channel and downloadable by 4 at chicago.suntimes.com, chicagoreader.com, and wherever else you listen to your favorite podcast. Yes, the Ben Joravsky Show is back. We're live and downloaded. Tell your friends and enjoy the rest of the show. If you would like to advertise with the Ben Joravsky Show, and who wouldn't, contact Tracy Boehm at publisher@chicagoreadercorp.com. We have several advertising options for your business or organization, and quite frankly, we would love nothing more than to tell our listeners all about it. Once again, that's Tracy Boehm at publisher@chicagoreadercorp, that's C-O-R-P as in Paul.com, to advertise with the Ben Joravsky Show, the Chicago Reader, and the Chicago Sun-Times. We look forward to plugging you. Okay, well, that came out kind of weird. More of the Ben Joravsky Show live and downloaded in moments. Welcome back to the Ben Joravsky Show. Mr. Joravsky, man, take us home.
I love that music. I don't know where he got it, but, you know, somebody should play that on the piano there. Willie Wilson, by the way, is a good singer. Maybe one day he'll come in the studio and sing some songs with me. By the way, Willie Wilson, Sam Cooke documentary on Netflix. Run, don't walk to watch it. You really want to. It gets into why Sam Cooke was killed. I urge you to watch. I know you're a Sam Cooke fan. We talked about before. Troy LaRavia, just your thoughts on what Willie was talking about, the attitudes of many ministers, etc., church people in the black community toward homosexuality.
Absolutely. First, you have two Sam Cooke fans here, so
okay.
Get into the question. Something that Dr. Wilson said that was one brave and deep. He said, because people don't like to do that, but he did. He said that was once an issue for me too. Right? That was once an issue for me too. And oftentimes when we discover that someone had some kind of anti-black or anti-homosexual or anti-anything past, we want to jump down on that person. He did this. It's exactly that kind of person because we want to change people's minds. Obviously, they're not that anymore. They've undergone some kind of transformation where their belief system has changed. And it's exactly that kind of person that we want to highlight and uplift if we want to change other people who are where they used to be. And so I think we need more people who've had, whether they were anti-black or anti-homosexual, to be honest about that and talk about that transformation, because he would be an exceptionally great ally in that religious community as someone who's gone through that transformation, to talk to those people about why he changed his mind. But oftentimes when we hear that, it's like, oh, he used to this, we don't want to vote for him, let's ban him. No, that's the people you want to find and uplift their stories. And so I'm glad you said that.
Yeah, I'm glad he said it as well. We're almost out of time here. Troy, I have to ask you, next time I'm going to bring you on, we'll talk more, take a deeper dive on the presidential race. Are you going to support Bernie Sanders this time around?
I haven't made a decision, but you know, as someone who risked his career to film a Bernie Sanders commercial criticizing Rahm Emanuel that got played repeatedly in the airwaves, you know, that's certainly, it's probably a 90% possibility that that's going to happen. But, you know, I'm going to do my due diligence, take a look at all the candidates that are out there. But again, it's Bernie's message. You know, Bernie's message that we're in a rigged economy, we're in a rigged economic system. And the people who run that economic system, who get benefit from it, take the money from that system and then use it to corrupt our political system to stop us from being able to make changes, once again, in the economic system. Like, that message is universal, and it describes almost every problem we face, whether it's in the environment, whether it's privatization of the school system, the Wall Street excesses. It is the central ill of our country, of our state, and our city, and I haven't heard anyone who focuses on that central ill the way Bernie does. And so he has a strong likelihood to keep me.
All right, Willie, have you made a decision yet? For president?
No, you know, I ran for president.
I am aware of that. Yeah.
I didn't know you were.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, we talked about it the last time you were on our show, and how the Clintons went hard on you with the lawsuits.
Oh, that's right, sure did. No, the person that I will endorse would be the person who come to the table and economic equality for job contract, not only in the United States, but the jobs and the contract international as well, who's not going to leave out the minority people. And I will have to come to the table and say, okay, let it reflect the population, okay, of America, taxpayer dollars, things of that nature. Don't mistreat anybody, whether you're white, black, or other. But make sure you don't leave out the black and brown and people that as well. And one person can explain that to me and have those same views, I'm all for it. And then prison reform, don't forget about prison reform, you know, get rid of these privatized prisons. Today, I look, people in slavery today, black people that is, way back in 1863, we were more freer. Prison made $4 or $5 billion. Privatized prison last year are black people in prison. Those things that I'm concerned about, and those particular things. Then I'll select who it would be. But they cannot come to Chicago and say, I'm going to do this and leave the black people out. I'm going to stand right in the way.
All right, very good. That's Willie Wilson, Troy LaRavia. Thank you both for coming in. Also want to thank Marc Brown, Miles Porter, the pride and joy of Roosevelt University, Steve James, a visitor to the studio, and, of course, the man, the myth, the legend behind the board, pride and joy of Alton, Illinois. They call him the doctor. Give yourself a raise. Take it out of petty cash. Thank you, Troy. Thank you, Willie. See you tomorrow, everybody.
The Ben Joravsky Show is brought to you by the International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers, Local 126 in District 8, the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Local 9, the International Union of Operating Engineers, Local 150, and thank you once again to the Chicago Federation of Labor. See you tomorrow.